difficulty with or incapability of emotional empathy or intelligent empathy. The why of things, part 4 of 15. Empathy is a fundamental part of healthy relationships. Most people naturally express both emotional and logical empathy, which makes it hard to understand when someone seems incapable of caring about others' feelings. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. For many people with cluster B traits, this capacity can be severely limited or even non-existent. They may struggle to grasp the emotions and needs of others, not out of malice, but because their internal world is so all-consuming that they can't look beyond themselves. So, for example, the person I got with, one of my first red flags, when I told her about my partner's death, she was like, "Oh, are you okay to be in another relationship?" Yeah, because it was all about her, right? That's what it was about. When we, at the end, when she was doing her thing, she said, I'm afraid you're going to walk out the door and I'll never see you again. And I was like, no, I'm here. Like, I'm not going anywhere. And she ran up to me and gave me a big hug and started crying. And then, of course, me being me and emotionally codependent at the time and feeling her pain and being like, what have I done? Like, she is damaged. Like, what the hell? I need to get her some help. I started crying too, She could not feel any of my emotions. She just couldn't feel that. So it's little wonder that she did what she did. I mean, if you can't feel someone else's pain for you, what? Like, the human species would be gone if even half of us were like that, So yeah, it makes it very confusing, and it makes it very challenging to recognize and to figure out what's going on. And hey, anyone out there that has been through that, man, I get it now. I get it. I understood it logically. I never got it emotionally before. And I get how confusing that is. That is insanely ridiculous. But you got to remember, again, this is not a normal, healthy person. This is a person who is completely damaged. They've been broken by other people, or their parents failed them. Whatever reason it is, the only people that can heal them is them. You can give them the tools, but I mean, if you really want to stick it out and they're really, truly committed, then you can go to therapy with them. Tried to do that with her. She wouldn't do it other than to clear the air after, 4 or 6 months of trying to get her to, I think I sent her 3 or 4 emails over 4 to 6 months. Can't remember the timeline. It's been a while. It's been a couple years. Everything about our relationship is stuck in my head, though, because that's what that's what that'll do to you. Ugh. It was very foggy at the time, and now I know why. Because I was going through acute PTSD. Definitely not the same as combat PTSD at all, but still, still stress disorder. Anyways, all right, where was I? Oh, yeah. However, the reasons for this lack of empathy can differ across the various disorders. The lack of empathy, what it is. A difficulty in recognizing or caring about the emotions, needs, or perspectives of others. This may manifest as a lack of concern for how one's actions affect others, or an inability to put oneself in someone else's shoes, whether emotionally or logically. What it isn't. Occasionally failing to understand someone else's point of view. Everyone has moments where they miss social cues or struggle to relate to others' emotions, but for individuals with cluster B traits, this lack of empathy is more pervasive and often intentional. Emotional versus logical empathy. Before diving into how empathy issues manifest in different disorders, it's important to distinguish between emotional empathy and logical empathy. Emotional empathy is the ability to feel what someone else is feeling. It's the gut-level understanding of another's emotional state. People who struggle with this type of empathy may appear cold, detached, or indifferent, even when others are clearly suffering. Logical empathy is the ability to intellectually understand someone else's emotions, even if you don't feel them yourself. While it's not as emotionally connected, logical empathy can still help guide appropriate responses to someone's needs. Those who lack even logical empathy often seem confused or indifferent in situations that require compassion or support. Why these people struggle with empathy. Let's explore why people with different cluster B disorders may have trouble with empathy. In IDD, they often lack both emotional and logical empathy. Their focus is entirely on their own needs, goals, and desires, and they see others as tools to be used rather than people with feelings. Empathy doesn't fit into their worldview because they simply don't care how others feel unless it directly impacts their own interests. This emotional disconnect makes it easy for them to manipulate or harm others without guilt or remorse. ESFT or NPD. With ESFT, the lack of empathy is largely due to their inflated self-image. They're so consumed with their own perfection and superiority that they fail to recognize others' emotional states. They may have moments of logical empathy where they understand intellectually that someone is hurt or upset, but because they see themselves as more important, they often dismiss or downplay others' feelings. Their emotional empathy, however, is often severely impaired. They may act empathetically when it benefits their image, but it rarely comes from a genuine place of concern. EID, or emotional intensity disorder, or BPD, by borderline personality disorder, those with EID often experience difficulty with empathy not because they don't care, but because their own emotions are so overwhelming that they can't make space for others' feelings. Their emotional empathy may fluctuate dramatically. They may feel deeply connected to someone one moment, then completely shut off the next. Their difficulty with empathy tends to stem from emotional instability, not a lack of care, and they may regret their inability to empathize during emotional outbursts. In calmer moments, they might exhibit logical empathy, but struggle to act on it consistently. DASD, or dramatic attention-seeking disorder, may seem to have emotional empathy when it suits their need for attention. They can be highly attuned to others' emotions if those emotions help them remain the center of attention. However, their empathy is often shallow, fleeting, and self-serving. They may engage in displays of compassion or concern, but it's typically to ensure that others continue to admire or focus on them. Logical empathy may be present, but it's often twisted to serve their need for validation rather than a genuine care for others. The impact of empathy deficits. When someone lacks empathy, whether emotional, logical, or both, it can create significant harm in their relationships. The inability to understand or care about the feelings of others leads to behaviors like manipulation, disregard for boundaries, and emotional cruelty. This is especially damaging because the person lacking empathy may not see the issue, leaving their partner or friend feeling deeply invalidated and emotionally isolated. And there you go. People that struggle with empathy they're the ones that manipulate. Normal, healthy people don't manipulate because they don't have to. In relationships, the absence of empathy often means the person with cluster B traits is primarily focused on their own needs and desires, leaving the other person feeling used or invisible. While those on the receiving end might try to explain their feelings, definitely did that, the lack of empathy makes it hard or impossible for the other party to even register the problem, let alone care enough to change. And there you go. Protecting yourself. Understanding that someone struggles with empathy or is incapable of it altogether is crucial for setting boundaries. It's important to accept that if someone isn't capable of caring for your emotional needs, no amount of explanation or effort on your part will make them start caring. Protecting your emotional health means recognizing this limitation and adjusting your expectations accordingly.